Welcome back to Disturbed Reality. In the early 2000s, Ecuador was regarded as a relatively peaceful nation in Latin America, particularly compared to its neighbours Colombia and Peru, which have had long histories of drug-related violence. However, over the last decade or so, Ecuador has undergone a dramatic transformation. Once considered a mere transit country for drugs originating in Colombia and destined for the United States and Europe, Ecuador has now become a central hub in the international drug trade. Increasingly described as a narco state, Ecuador is now characterized by rampant violence, institutional corruption, and the growing influence of transnational criminal organizations. Today, we will explore how Ecuador evolved into a narco state, focusing on the emergence and operations of local gangs, their methods of control and violence, and the strategic alliances that they have formed with powerful Mexican drug cartels. Ecuador's geographic position makes it an ideal corridor for drug trafficking. Sharing a porous border with Colombia, one of the world's largest cocaine producers, and possessing major Pacific ports such as Guayaquil, Manta, and Esmeraldas, the country provides an efficient role for narcotics to reach global markets. These logistical advantages, combined with historically underfunded law enforcement and a lack of institutional oversight, have created fertile ground for drug trafficking organizations. One key aspect which is rarely discussed is Ecuador's use of the US dollar as its national currency, which facilitates money laundering and financial transactions related to the drug trade. Weak judicial systems, overcrowded and violent prisons, and widespread poverty further exacerbated the problem, allowing criminal organizations to flourish. The most powerful criminal organization in Ecuador is currently Los Choneros. Emerging in the early 2000s in the coastal province of Manabí, Los Choneros were initially a gang of hired killers and extortionists. Over time, however, they expanded their operations to include drug trafficking, arms dealing, and territorial control of key transit routes. Under the leadership of Jorge Luis Zambrano, aka Rasquina, and later under Jose Adolfo Macias Villamar, aka Fito, Los Choneros developed into a sophisticated and vertically integrated criminal enterprise. Their presence is most strongly felt in Guayaquil, Ecuador's largest port city, which has become the epicenter of drug-related violence. Los Choneros exert control over various urban neighborhoods and have a dominant presence inside the prison system, which they use as a base for coordinating external criminal operations, as well as using as a fertile ground for recruitment. Their tactics include extortion, targeted assassinations, and gruesome displays of violence, such as beheadings and dismemberments, designed to instill fear in those who dare go against them, whether that be police or the general public. Following the 2020 assassination of the gang's leader, Jorge Luis Zambrano, aka Rasquina, internal divisions within Los Choneros led to a violent fragmentation. New rival groups emerged from this bloody split, including Los Lobos, Los Tiburones, and Los Choneros. These gangs began vying for control over drug routes, urban territory, and prison blocks, and naturally this caused a spike in Ecuador's murder statistics. Each of these factions mirrors the operational style of Los Choneros, engaging in brutal turf wars, deploying military-grade weaponry, and using social media to broadcast executions, threats, and propaganda. These splinter groups have also formed their own alliances with foreign cartels, creating a multipolar gang landscape that further destabilizes Ecuadorian society. The involvement of Mexican drug cartels, primarily the Sinaloa cartel and the Jalisco New Generation cartel, CJNG, has significantly deepened Ecuador's narco crises. These organizations have chosen to partner with Ecuadorian gangs rather than directly operate in the country, providing them with financing, weapons, and logistical support. The Sinaloa cartel is believed to have long-standing ties with Los Choneros. This partnership enables the cartel to secure cocaine shipments from Colombia and transport them through Ecuador's ports with minimal resistance. In regards to CJNG, they have reportedly aligned themselves with Los Lobos and Los Tiburones, providing them with sophisticated weaponry and training in exchange for access to transit corridors. These alliances have essentially internationalized Ecuador's gang wars, turning local conflicts into regional proxy battles largely funded by Mexican drug cartels. Intelligence reports and leaked communications suggest that Mexican cartel emissaries often visit Ecuador to coordinate operations and mediate disputes between factions. The methods employed by Ecuadorian gangs are increasingly paramilitary in nature. This is possibly a knock-on effect from their relationships with Mexican drug cartels. They use intimidation, bribes, and violence to control police units, judges, and politicians. A notable example was the assassination of presidential candidate Fernando Villavicencio in 2023, allegedly ordered by gang leaders in retaliation for his anti-narcotic stance. Gangs use extortion and taxation schemes to generate revenue, forcing businesses and even entire neighbourhoods to pay for protection. Inside prisons, gang leaders control entire wings, smuggling in weapons, cell phones, and even filming music videos and propaganda materials. Public acts of violence, such as beheadings, dismemberments and disembowelments, and the broadcasting of executions on social media, serve to terrorise the population and send messages to rivals. These tactics also reflect a cultural shift within the criminal underworld in Ecuador, where brutality is not only a tool, but also a brand, much like with what we see in Mexico and Brazil. Ecuador's prison system has become a central hub for organised crime. Prisons are not merely detention centres, but command posts for criminal enterprises. The lack of state control within these facilities has allowed gangs to entrench themselves, often turning prisons into recruitment centres and war zones. The 2021 and 2022 prison riots, which resulted in hundreds of deaths, highlighted the state's inability to govern its own correctional facilities. Prison massacres often coincide with outside gang activity, reflecting their interlinked nature. Successive Ecuadorian governments have struggled to contain the growing crises. In 2024, following a wave of gang-related violence and the escape of Los Choneros leader Jose Adolfo Macias Villamar, aka Fito from prison, President Daniel Noboa declared a nationwide state of emergency and labelled the situation as an internal armed conflict. The government deployed military forces to the streets and prisons, implemented curfews, and passed constitutional reforms allowing for the extradition of Ecuadorian nationals involved in organised crime. Despite these measures, violence persisted, and critics argued that the militarised approach addresses the symptoms rather than causes. Endemic corruption remains a key obstacle. Police and military personnel are frequently caught collaborating with gangs. Judges are bribed or threatened into releasing key suspects. Political campaigns are allegedly funded with narco money, leading to compromised policy making, not favouring the people, but favouring the gangs. Ecuador's descent into a narco state has profound international implications. The surge in drug exports from Ecuadorian ports has impacted global drug markets, especially in Europe, where seizures of Ecuador-linked cocaine shipments have risen dramatically. International agencies, including the United States DEA and Interpol, have increased cooperation with Ecuadorian authorities. In 2025, joint operations led to the arrest of Los Choneros leader, Fito, in the city of Manta, a huge blow on paper for Los Choneros. Fito was then extradited to the USA, where he is now facing charges related to international cocaine trafficking, as well as arms trafficking. With Fito now in prison, how Los Choneros will regroup will be interesting. Some speculate that we may see more internal infighting, creating yet more violence as power-hungry gangsters fight for control of the organisation. The arrest of Fito will also embolden rival groups, such as Los Tiburones, Los Choneros, and in particular Los Lobos, who are widely considered Ecuador's second biggest cartel. Ultimately, Ecuador's rise into becoming an arguable narco state is yet just another example, in my opinion, of the issue being more than just a national problem for the respective countries affected by cartel violence. Instead, it's a geopolitical crisis that is yet to be treated as such by politicians, both across the Western world and in Latin America. Reversing Ecuador's transformation into a narco-state will require a multi-pronged strategy. Key components must include institutional reform, strengthening the independence and integrity of the judiciary and police force. Prison overhaul is another key aspect, and the state must regain control of correctional facilities through reform, monitoring, and rehabilitation programs. Social investment is another key area, addressing the root causes of gang recruitment such as poverty, unemployment, and a lack of education. But most importantly, international cooperation is required. Continued support from regional and global allies can help dismantle transnational networks of drug traffickers. The equation ultimately is supply and demand. Both areas need to be tackled by authorities, yet ever since Reagan coined the term the war on drugs, primarily the focus has been on the supply end of things, more so than looking inwards and asking the honest and difficult questions about why our societies feel the need on an ever-increasing scale to take such destructive substances. Ecuador's evolution into a narco-state is the result of geographic vulnerability, institutional fragility, and the calculated infiltration of powerful criminal organizations. The rise of gangs like Los Choneros and the involvement of Mexican cartels have transformed the country's social and political landscape. While recent government efforts have led to high-profile arrests and a renewed focus on security, lasting change will require deep structural reforms and sustained international collaboration. If left unchecked, Ecuador risks becoming a cautionary tale of how quickly organised crime can hollow out the state from within. In recent days, a shocking piece of content was released which encapsulates the brutality of the ongoing wars in the country of Ecuador. The video is a bloody byproduct of a war between Los Choneros and Los Lobos. Los Lobos are a part of a wider gang and coalition named Noe Henion, who are sponsored by Mexican cartel CJNG. Noe Henion is not a single gang, but rather a coalition of multiple criminal groups including Los Lobos, Los Tiburones, Los Choneros, and Los Pipos. The gang coalition's efforts have been most visible in Ecuador's prison system, where deadly riots and massacres have taken place between Noe Henion members and Choneros loyalists. Coordinated attacks across prisons in Guayaquil, Latacunga and Cuenca in 2021 and 2022 resulted in hundreds of deaths, highlighting the scale and brutality of this ongoing conflict. Outside prison walls, Noe Henion has also been involved in high-profile assassinations, car bombings, extortion, and public terror campaigns, including leaving dismembered bodies in public spaces. Noe Henion's rapid rise has not only weakened Los Choneros, but also exposed the fragility of Ecuador's state institutions. The Noe Henion coalition are certainly not at the level of Los Choneros yet, but they have rapidly closed the gap since they split from the organisation in 2020, and with CJNG's help in the aspects of training, funding and weaponry, they may even potentially be able to take the #1 spot. In conclusion, Noe Henion is more than just a gang alliance, it's a new kind of criminal organisation reshaping Ecuador's security landscape. With transnational support, internal cohesion and violent tactics, it has disrupted the balance of power in Ecuador's underworld and presents an ongoing challenge to national and regional stability. Despite their rise, however, they still face formidable opposition in Los Choneros, and the recent clip in question truly highlights the savage nature of their rivals. But nevertheless, what happens in the actual videos? The video in question is exactly 2 minutes and 6 seconds in length. Actually, it seems to be a couple of clips essentially spliced together. The video itself is eerily similar to the graphic execution clips that the Mexican cartel Los Zetas would release in the early 2010s, during their war with the Gulf Cartel. The clip has that type of aesthetic. The video has been shot during daylight hours, and at the start of the video you see 3 young men who I would estimate to be in their late teens, all laying on the ground on their stomachs, and they all have their hands tied behind their backs, as well as their ankles. They've kind of been loosely hogtied. 2 of the young men actually look like brothers. At the start of the video, all 3 men can be heard simultaneously mumbling to the camera, possibly confessing as to what gang they are affiliated with, which is Los Lobos. Presumably, those who perpetrated and filmed the graphic murder were members of Los Choneros. The video then takes a jump cut after a few seconds, and it now once again shows all three men still laying on the ground stomach first, but they are much more distressed. One of the victims can be heard screaming and pleading. Standing near the men are multiple gang members, all three of which are holding rusty looking machetes. The victim closest to the camera pleads hard as a Sicario hovers over him with ruthless intent. The Sicario then strikes down hard onto the back of the victim's neck, causing the captive to let out a deep growl of pain. The hitman strikes several more times in the same area, causing a huge laceration and possibly even breaking the spine. The victim stops making noise or movements quite quickly. The two other victims can be seen as they wait their turn. The victim second closest to the camera then gets his turn. Another machete-wielding Sicario hacks away at the back of the neck, again causing the victim to let out horrific grunting sounds. The second hitman's machete appears to be much sharper, and it cuts through flesh and cartilage extremely quickly. In a few whacks with the blade, the victim is partially beheaded, but somehow the victim still tries to roll over onto his side, but in doing so, he just gives up the side of his neck, which the Sicario proceeds to hack away at, severing the carotid artery, causing insane blood flow. It's worth noting at this point, the third victim in the background is also being worked on. However, the Sicario is struggling to even get the beheading started. His blade is just bouncing off the back of the victim's neck, prolonging the ordeal. The Sicario working on the first victim at this point abandons the beheading. Instead, he just uses the blade to hack away at both of the captive's arms at the elbow area, causing severe damage on both arms without fully dismembering him. Because the victim's arms have been tied behind the captive's back, the Sicario has also struck the victim's back with the machete several times, causing deep lacerations. You see layers of fat under the skin. It's awful. The Sicario working on the third victim has at this point managed to get the beheading started. Blood is pouring from the back of his neck where the hitman has been striking, but it appears as if he is still alive, as he is moving the back of his legs and is keeping them elevated. The closest two victims to the camera appear to be dead at this point, and a fourth Sicario then enters the fray, and he's also carrying a machete, and he hacks away at the arms of the two victims. He just goes back and forth. The third victim at this point is left alone. He's not moving much, but you still see that he's clearly breathing. The first victim in particular is an absolute mess at this point. He's been partially beheaded, partially dismembered, and has huge lacerations across his back. The second victim has also been partially beheaded and partially dismembered. It's been a frenzied hack job, quite frankly. The third victim remains alive, but barely. The video then jump cuts and you are met with a POV shot of all three victims completely beheaded and dismembered. The person filming is holding a lit blunt up to the camera, a victory spliff I guess. A note has also been placed on the pile of body parts which reads, "All those wolves are going to die," referring to Los Lobos. The camera just focuses on the body parts for several seconds, and on one of the severed heads, it looks like one of the victims' noses have been cut off. Again, another jump cut. This time, it just shows bloody bags in which the body parts have been placed, again with the same note on top. Now, just as I finished writing this script, I managed to obtain another video from this case. It's about 25 seconds in length, and it details just after the victims were captured by Los Choneros, and it appears that the victims are sitting in the back of a pickup truck or an SUV. The people in the front of the car are filming the victims as they mock them, making howling wolf sounds, and they slap the victims with the flat edges of their machetes. All three of the captives naturally look absolutely terrified. Ultimately, I'm sure that they knew that their fate would be gruesome. I've not covered too many cases from Ecuador, but this might be one of the worst that has emerged from the growing narco problem in the country. Like I said, it's akin to more of an old school Mexican cartel video than anything I've seen from the country so far. Maybe they're learning from their Mexican counterparts. But anyway, that is the video. I hope you enjoyed it, if you can enjoy this sort of content. So we continue to march on. I do plan, by the way, just to let you guys know, on making a follow-up video for the Vietnam beheading clip. A bit more information has come out since, but still a lot of contrasting information, contradictory information I would say, but nevertheless some interesting details, including potential identification of the victim as well as the killer, but obviously as of right now it's still up in the air. Doesn't appear that anybody's been arrested yet, but it's really hard to tell. But right now the information is trickling out, I would say, but maybe not quite enough to make a cohesive sort of follow-up video, because I think it needs one, quite frankly. But we will get round to that when we can. Also next week I'm hoping to get an El Mencho biographic out, quite a long video, so yeah, there's that to look forward to as well. Anyway guys, if you're new here, if you could hit subscribe. If you want to follow me on Twitter or Twitch, links will be in the pinned comments. And as always, stay safe, and I'll catch you on the next one.